say a big thank you to Kraken Black Spiced Rum for sponsoring and collaborating with me on this video. If you're in Sydney and you want some fun plans for Halloween, the Kraken Black Spiced Rum Scream Fest is landing on Sydney shores on the 31st of October, and it's a Halloween event that you don't want to miss. Tickets are only $20 on Eventbrite, and I'll put the link to them in my description box below. Inspired by the Screamfest event and the Kraken tale, today I'll be showing you how to bring one of the characters of the deep sea to life. But I wanted her to be a little bit different from the other mermaids. I wanted her to be a bit creepier, a bit more scalier, and just a bit less colourful. The first step will be sculpting the scales, which will cover the chest area. I thought that the clamshell brows were a little bit too cutesy, and I wanted something a bit more real and organic feeling, something more fishy. I have an outline that I drew on myself using cling film and a permanent marker so that I can get an idea of the size and shape. And then once I've got the shape down on the board, I'm going to flatten it out. Initially I use some heat and my fingers, and then I move on to a couple of raking tools. Once that is nice and smooth, I'm going to work on the scales. They are applied individually. I used a normal kitchen rolling pin to roll out some of this clay so that would be the same thickness. And then I cut out each individual scale. Each piece was positioned and then it was fully flattened out the back so that I could layer them on top of each other without it getting too bulky. And I slowly increased the size in each one until we hit the center, and then I started decreasing the size again so that the larger scales would be in the center and the edge scales would be smaller and blend off into the skin. Once all of those were finished, using my finger I just rounded off the edges to soften the sculpt a little bit, and then went over it all with some solvents to soften it. Initially I started with some isopropyl alcohol, but it wasn't doing as good a job as I wanted to, so I switched over to Shellite, which really melts the clay down, but you do have to wear a mask while using it because the fumes are pretty toxic. I also sculpted these long seaweed pieces, which I was going to use for hair, but they didn't quite work out. I'll show you what happened and you can see why I decided not to use them. Once all of the solvent had evaporated from those scales, I'm going to put up a wall using some acetate film and a hot glue gun. And once that sculpt is contained and waterproof, I'm going to pour about 1 kilogram of Platsil gel 25 to make my mold. I should note that a big reason that flat molding this works is because I am quite flat chested. I think if you had a larger chest, trying to get this to curve around that would be quite difficult, but because I'm not applying it over anything like crazy curvaceous, it does sit quite well. So if you were wanting to do this and you had a large chest, you'd probably have to take a life cast of it first and do a 2-part mold instead of doing it as a flat mold. Once that silicone has cured after about an hour, I can peel off the acetate, pull off the mold, and if there's any clay stuck inside that mold still, I can gently clean it off with some isopropyl alcohol. While I was cleaning the mold, I also quickly trimmed it, and now I'm putting a thin layer of Vaseline over everything and letting it soak in. I also put a second layer of release, which is the Ultra 4 epoxy par film. Now I've got my spray gun and I've got some thinned down cat plastic and acetone that I'm spraying over the mold. I believe I did 3 layers. Once the cat plastic had dried, I'm mixing up my silicone now. I'm using Platsil Gel 10. I think I have about 160-170% Deadener, and I'm putting in a little bit of silicone pigments and a little bit of acrylic paints to create a custom coloring. After mixing up that silicone, I pour it into the mold, and then using a big metal scraper, I'm going to scrape the excess silicone off the mold, giving us nice clean edges. I am going over that outer edge with a cotton tip just to make sure that there is no silicone left on that blending edge. I didn't do flashing on this one, which is that line of clay I usually put around the outside, mostly because I wanted to be really fast with creating this prosthetic, and I thought with this design and placement I could get away with not having it. After about half an hour, when that silicone is cured, I'm going to spray 2 more layers of cat plastic on the back. I gave that cat plastic a quick blow dry just to speed it along, and now I'm putting a layer of translucent powder on the back, and I'm gently demolding this piece. I cut it in half down the center so that it would be easier to store and easier to apply. Alright, now for the application, I'm going to start by gluing down my brows first because I wanted this to be a browless mermaid. So I've got some Prosaide and a cotton tip, and I'm just pushing this through the brows and flattening them out as it dries. And now I'm going to apply these Got Flesh prosthetics. These are eyebrow covers in medium. For these, you have to clean off the layer of powder on the back with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and then I'm going to put a thin layer of Prosaide Adhesive over the top of them. Once that Prosaide Adhesive is clear and dry, I'm going to position it face down onto this water slide paper and cut around the outer edges of the prosthetic. Now I peel off that acetate layer and it's ready to be applied. I position it over my eyebrow. I wanted to bring it a bit closer to my nose because I thought that I could change my facial shape a little bit doing that. It didn't really make too much of a difference though. Once it has been pushed down onto the skin and is sticking there, I get a wet paper towel and I pat this over the water slide paper until it releases and slides off the prosthetic, leaving us with the brow cover in place. I also use the wet paper towel to gently push the outer edges back down into place if they have lifted. I do the same process for the other eye, and then I get a cotton tip with a very small amount of isopropyl alcohol on it, and I gently blend out the edges of that prosthetic. Now I'm going to seal the Prosaide transfers so that they're no longer sticky and shiny. I'm going to use the matte sealer by Bluebird. This has gotten rid of most of my eyebrow texture, but some of the color is still showing through, so I'm going to use the Bluebird Pale Skin palette, and there's this nice orange color in there which is really good for covering up tattoos, and the color of my brows coming through is similar to that old tattoo color, so I'm going to put that over the top to counteract that darkness. Now I'm moving on to the spatter brush. So spattering around your own eyes is slightly difficult because you can't quite see where it's going. You can kind of feel it, but you can't see it. So I'm going to close my eyes and spatter on a couple of the colors from the Pale Skin palette to try and make these brow covers match my skin a little bit better. Now I'm going to take a break from color matching the brows and start applying the gills onto my neck. I ran these gills out of a Stuart Bray mold that I bought from him because I absolutely fell in love with the sculpt of it. I thought it was really cool, and now I finally have a makeup that I can use it in. So I apply a thin layer of Prosaide Adhesive on the back and then gently line it up with my neck to get the right positioning before I push down onto the skin. You can see I have relifted it and repositioned it a little bit until it's in the right position because I am trying to fit two of them onto my neck. Once I'm happy with the positioning, I'm going to apply a little bit more Prosaide around the outsides to the corners that aren't quite sticking down to make sure that all of it is adhered down onto my neck. And now I'm going to start blending out the edge of the cap plastic by getting a brush with a tiny bit of acetone on it and just running that right along the edge of that flashing. I'm realizing at this point that it actually is really hard applying stuff onto your own neck when I can't see the back 1/3 of it at all, so I had to get Chopper to help me blend out the back of that neck piece. I repeat the same steps for the other side, so applying Prosaide Adhesive, waiting for that to dry, positioning it on my neck, gluing down any extra edges that are coming up, and then blending out the cap plastic with a tiny bit of acetone on a thin brush. Once those have been blended out, I get some more mattifying sealer and I put that over both of those prosthetics. Now I'm going to try and make this color match my neck a little bit better, so I'm going to start with some light mauve from the Complexion palette. I'm going to spatter this over the prosthetics. Now I'm going to spatter over a very translucent layer of cool tone blue, and then I'll mix up some of the pale flesh tone colors from the Bluebird palette and spatter that over the top as well. Then I mix up a very translucent layer of the DT blush and spatter that over the top of everything. It's a really nice skin finishing color, even though it looks quite bright in the palette. And then I'll spatter some pastel yellow over the top of the prosthetics. Now I'm going to go back up to the brows and using some of those same colors to try and get the brows to match a bit better. So I'm going to be using some of the Complexion colors like the cool tone blue, pastel yellow, DT blush, and a little bit of the pale flesh tone colors from Bluebird. Now I'm going to apply some moisturizing primer. I like this one by First Aid Beauty. Before I put down some foundation, I'm putting a foundation that is a shade or two lighter than my face just to pale it up a little bit. I also brought the foundation down to my neck because it is important to have your gills match your face. This is the NYX HD foundation, and then I'm also using the NYX concealer under my eyes and over my chin because I don't think that mermaids are supposed to have acne, or if they did, maybe it would be like barnacles or something, I'm not quite sure. Next, I put a layer of translucent powder over my face just to set the concealer and foundation and make everything look slightly less shiny. And then at this point, when all of me was hairless and the same color and weirdly gilly, I decided would be the best opportunity to take a really flattering selfie. And I'm going to start applying some eyeshadow. I'm using the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. This is that light mauve color in it. And I'm bringing that above and underneath the eyes. I also bring that eyeshadow very subtly down onto the ends of my nose and around my lips. I'm also going to apply a little bit of contour just to bring a little bit more shape back into my face. And then using that brown contour color, I'm also applying that into the center of my eyes just to deepen that coloring a little bit. Now for highlighter, I thought that Fenty Beauty's Confetti would be the perfect highlighter for this, just because it's this blue and purple glitter. So I'm applying that over my cheekbones and on my chin. Now I'm coloring in those gills with some alcohol paints. This is the Complexion palette again. And you can see from this angle I didn't quite get the back that well blended or that well matched, just simply because I couldn't see it when I was doing it. But it doesn't matter because that part is hidden by hair. and isn't facing the camera anyway, but you can see it in this angle, so I felt like I had to explain that. So I put this dark mauve red in the inside of the gills, and I got Chopper to help me do the back because I just literally couldn't see it. And then I added a little bit of like a purple vein tone and brown into the center of those just to darken them up slightly. Now I've mixed up another similar color using a little bit of brown and a little bit of purple from the Bluebird character palette, and I'm just placing that coloring in the deepest parts of the gills because they do have this nice curvature to them, and I wanted to highlight and contour those a little bit more. Now I've got a light flesh tone color to use as a highlight. I'm just running this along the edge of the gills and along the highest points. I'm painting my scales. I applied these off camera because I didn't want to get demonetized. So I've got the scales on, I glued them and blended them out the same way as the other prosthetics, and now I'm using some alcohol paints. I'm starting with a light flesh tone around the edge of the scales. I want them to blend into my skin color on the outside and then remain that light color on the center. So I'm using a spatter brush, and then once I've got that first color down, I'm adding some pinks just to add a lot more of that blood tone into them, and then I'm adding some pastel yellow and some cool tone blue as well. And using a chip brush to spatter on colors does help the color to be a bit more diffused around the outside and then coming into no color in the center. Now to make the rest of my body match my face, which is slightly paler than everything else, I'm going to do a really light layer of alcohol paints. I'm going to airbrush it over my arms, my chest, my neck, and my face a little bit. This is a mix of a couple of different alcohol paints that I have in the liquid form by Skin Illustrator and Bluebird. And airbrushing does enable you to do this quite quickly and just have a really nice light layer that just lightens everything enough, and it's also waterproof so that when I take photos in the bath later, this doesn't come off. Actually, speaking of which, all of these prosthetics are waterproof. The eyebrow covers to a larger extent because Prosaide transfers are the best things to use if you're going in a water environment, but the silicone transfers do last in a watery environment. Not for like a large amount of time, but for what I did, they did last. Now this is one of my favorite parts. I have this really cool iridescent violet Pearl PAX paint by Mel Products, and when you apply this over the scales, it just makes them pop. Like, it looks so amazing. So this is a violet pearl color, and I've just used a stipple brush and I've thinned it down with a little bit of PAX thinner, and I've just applied it lightly over those chest scales and also over the gills a little bit. But I feel like it just makes such a huge difference. It makes it look really pretty. Now, here's where my idea to have a hair that was seaweed didn't quite work out, because I think I needed to have it be like a full cowl and have none of my hair showing and have it be just seaweed for it to work. A mix of like the tentacly seaweed and the green seaweed in my hair just didn't quite look right. So I applied them all on the front using Prosaide Adhesive and just blending it out with acetone and layering it in there, but it just, by the end of it, when I put the teeth in and I had the contact lenses in, I just didn't like how it sat. It wasn't quite the overall aesthetic that I was going for, so I was like, maybe I'll try adding a little bit darker eyes, see if that changes anything. I'm using some cream colors by Ben Nye, and then I was still not feeling it, so now I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna remove this from my face and just have my hair down and have a couple of pieces of seaweed through it at the back, but have it be more subtle. And sometimes it's like, I put a lot of work and money and time into making these, but ultimately if you don't like how it's sitting or how it looks, you just have to be like, well, I guess that didn't work, and I learned for next time. So I left a couple of bits of seaweed in the hair. The green stuff I just got from eBay. It's like a fake house plant. I have some mirror lenses in, which I got through my optometrist because I want to be really safe with my eyesight. And the teeth I got from Dental Distortions, and I thought they were perfect for this because they look a little bit sharky and a bit like mangled and messed up, but they also make my lips create more of a fishy lip shape, if that makes sense. And this is the final look before we hopped into our bathtub to try and keep the mermaid alive. Very splash 1984. So I hopped into the bathtub and I put on a mermaid tail, which I rented from one of my friends who is a mermaid performer because she lives a very cool life. And then we took some crazy photos. I added a bath bomb in there, which gives it a slight milky effect because I wanted to disguise the join for where the tail hits my hips, just because it's kind of unblended, unlike the chest scales. And then I added little fingernails. I just got these long curved overhang nails and just cut them thinner, and I literally just blue tacked them on for the photo shoot because I didn't want to have to deal with having claws that were permanently attached to me. And then I had to make creepy faces, and this is how we ended up with this final product.
Excuse you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you like it, my take on a creepy mermaid. And thank you so much to the Kraken Black Spiced Rum and Screamfest for sponsoring this. It enabled me to do a look that I've wanted to do for a while, but I needed a bit more materials and stuff to make it a bigger look. So it was really fun to finally be able to create this. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know what your plans are for Halloween. Are you staying in? Are you going out? Do you want to watch some scary movies with me? And if you're not already subscribed, you can subscribe here. I'll be back with more Halloween videos soon. Take care of yourself. Alright, bye guys.